Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, if this is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast, this is a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I like to take a casual approach to the hobby, so on this podcast, we talk about, the games that we run and the cool games that we play in and the cool, wonderful, awesome people we get to experience the hobby with. If this is your first time to tabletop RPGs, what are you doing? Go find yourself a table and go have some fun. And if you are a player at someone's table, maybe it's your time to jump behind the GM screen and, run a session for your lovely folks that you play with.
Indeed. So this week, I started a new Pathfinder 2-week campaign, and I was going to get into that because it's kind of a different thing than my typical sort of campaign. It's going to be a lot more, well, my intention is that it's a lot more focused, and I'm very excited with how things are going so far, and the players are, of course, keeping me on my toes. So I'm really excited to get into that. But before we do, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by Calvin. Thanks, Calvin.
Yeah, so one of the things I did in this game is I really dove to the bottom of the barrel in the amount of voices that I have that I can do semi-confidently as a GM, except my cowboy voice. I don't think I used that one yet. But I did kind of want to talk about just like doing different voices with regards to running games or even just playing a character. Because it's not always just putting on like an accent or something like that. Like you can also just change sort of the pitch of how you speak, or like how fast you talk, or just add different things that a person might do, like certain repeated phrases, pausing on certain words, or using specific sets of words. And when it comes to doing like different kinds of voices, there are a ton of videos out there on YouTube, especially of just like examples of how to do voices and instruction on how to do certain voices. And even without that, if you just listen to, like, if there's a certain specific voice you want to replicate, and you just listen to an example of that, like a few samples from a TV show or movie or whatever you're thinking of, you just try to repeat those things, and then you try to repeat those with different words. It might sometimes take a bit of practice if you want to get it totally right. I know I still struggle with a lot of stuff sometimes, but I think like the main thing it comes down to with regard to doing voices and running games, it's just like to just go for it. Because the thing that'll trip you up is when you second guess it. At least for me, that's largely been the case, is when I second guess, like, why did my O sound like an A or whatever? Like, that's the thing that throws me off, and then I have to, like, repeat what I said or figure things out again. Honestly, like, a lot of it is just, you keep going with it. You do it over and over again, and eventually it'll sound right, and you're also most likely playing with people you want to be around, for the most part. So if you're a little silly around them, you do a little voice around them that doesn't exactly turn out the way you want it, you can still have fun with that. And at the end of the day, like, it can just be what that sounds like in the world of the game. That's just what this particular accent sounds like. That's what fantasy French sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. I obviously I love fantasy French, good old French Canadians. It's just all oh man, I'm gonna get so much trouble. But yeah, no, my French Canadian accent always comes out somehow. I don't even know if it's a good French Canadian accent, but I know what you mean. Another, I want to just kind of add on to it. Like, you could also bring a lot to a voice by like physically moving. Like, if you want to sound like a really big person, it actually helps to just kind of puff out your chest and like talk like that. Or you want to like a small person or someone who's scared, like physically get small or physically get scared or whatever you want to do, right? Like, it helps a lot with playing the character. It also helps a lot with getting that voice across.
Yeah, absolutely. Just try to embody the sort of character you're trying to play, and that can also really help you when it comes to, role playing that character, if you just have that different stance.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's not all about like the accents. Could even be like their cadence, the choices of words they take, or like how short or long their sentences are, right? Like,
yeah.
That's like a pretty, indication of like what that person is, even if you've never done an accent or don't even want to do an accent. Considering the character first will always get across what you're trying to say better.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Calvin. There you go, folks. There's your Woman Dice Weekly Gym tip of the week. Voices aren't all accents, but they all are character. They're all are characters? Yeah, that's good. Good enough.
Yeah, I think people can figure out what that means.
Yeah.
All right. I did want to mention up top, there is some info out there with regards to the Pathfinder 2E remaster. Just because, the PDF subscribers on Paizo have gotten a copy of the book. I know like there's a bunch of influencers and stuff that have it, or content creators, or whatever term is more appropriate. So we'll probably talk about that within the next coming weeks. I just, I haven't gotten too deep into it, but there is some stuff I think is interesting. They did lower the difficulty of aid checks, which I think is a good thing, because, if you critically fail an aid check in Pathfinder 2, you can actually cause a detriment to the person's check, and I think just lowering that DC makes people more likely to try to help someone.
Yeah. Or like it does the problem is it does the opposite, right? Which is funny in a, like comedically, but sometimes shit is like dire. So
yeah.
And it also it makes it so like I think like actually 50% of the time when you try and aid somebody either succeeds flawlessly or it critically fails. Like there's no in between, from what I remember. Like
yeah, it does kind of feel that way. Like if you regular fail, it doesn't do anything still, but I don't know, because the DC, like, because it's lower, I would just prefer, even if it's a little broken in how helpful it is, I would just prefer people, attempt to aid with whatever they have, rather than feel like, my number isn't high enough, so my character can't do something my character would do.
Yeah, you know what? I wish that instead of it being like an attempt to aid and it's a roll, it's just a static bonus based off of your skill level in whatever task you're doing. Because like, let's say somebody has like, you have somebody who has like I don't know, I forget numbers, like 5 in athletics. They're trying to like climb up a cliff. You have a 20 athletics because like you're like double their score. You have to add like +2 or something to the roll. So you're helping automatically because you're better than them, right? I think that would be like a pretty cool way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have assurance on it, you can do that. I don't know. That also just kind of like, I feel like that might lean to, again, like if your thing is too low, that you're kind of discouraged from helping. Like at least if you roll a die, you have a possibility of not ruining things.
Oh, well, I mean, like, there weren't going to be any consequences if you're lower than the score. It's just like an example.
Then yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not, yeah, it's just kind of like off the fly. Like, what would I do? But it's,
fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. You listeners, if you think that was a good idea, let me know.
I mean, as long as there's no negative for messing things up, then yeah. But yeah, there's also stuff like things we've already talked about, how they're changing alignment, how they're changing refocus. There's new class feats for the classes, and that's something that I don't think we've talked about a lot, and something I do want to look at. I did see one for the fighter that's like, if you're ever subject to forced movement, but you have a weapon in hand and you're near a hard surface, then as a reaction, you can pretty much negate that movement. Basically, like, you don't move at all unless that thing would have moved you 20 or more feet, in which case you only move 5 feet.
Yeah,
which
it's like
I
you
think
plunge
is
your
cool
sword
visual.
into the ground, right? Yeah, it's really cool. Like, instantly when you said it, I was like, this is exactly what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, sick. They did the thing that everyone does.
Yeah, man. So I think it sounds pretty cool. So we'll probably get into that. I'll look around at all the people who are talking about it and just write stuff down that seems interesting.
Nice.
But let's get into this new campaign that I'm running. So my Crown of Dragons group, we're taking a bit of a break from the main campaign, and we're just trying out something a bit different, something a bit lower stakes, something a bit more character focused. I started a new urban city-based campaign called, I wasn't sure about this name. I just kind of I wanted to make it work, but it's called The Rule of Coin. Fitting in with my pattern of naming campaigns, the blank of blank. And additionally, it was kind of inspired by some of the music that I listen to when I'm doing campaign prep, including some bardcore remixes of hip-hop songs. And it just got me really wanting to do like a very like, fantasy Grand Theft Auto kind of game.
Nice. Putting a crew together, going on a mission, doing a thing. Nice.
Yeah. So the song I've been using a lot for this campaign is a bardcore remix of Cash Rules Everything Around Me, hence the name of the campaign itself. So basically the main thrust of this campaign is that it takes place in a city by the name of Tiriane, and the players are sort of low-level mercenary, thievery, bandit types who are coming up in the world, getting small jobs, and maybe stumbling into things that are, they could be beyond them, or they could just be working on making their reputation within the city itself. Fantasy GTA, like I said. And I really like the characters that people came up with. We did have a couple of sessions where I don't know if session is the right word. A couple of times we were just hanging out, basically. And we kind of talked about the characters we wanted to play, some variant rule systems that we wanted to use, including the free archetype system, because I wanted to give people the chance to like sort of make a character the way they want to play it. And free archetype is basically like every even level, you essentially get a free archetype feat that doesn't, like you don't have to pay for with a usual class feat or whatever.
Ooh, okay.
And the archetypes of, like they're all interesting character-wise, and they have some abilities, but they're not so strong that they, like, offset the entire game, basically.
Right.
So, yeah, so we have, as far as characters go, there is Alfie, who is a human swashbuckler. There's Poppy Pemberton, who is a fetchling rogue. Hubo, who's a kobold ranger, and Mr. Buttons, a catfolk sorcerer.
Of course.
And yeah, they all have their, their roguish charms, their charlatans, their criminals, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in the first session, they were hired by a half-orc fence by the name of Lucky Tate. So again, like all my campaigns have been taking place in my same homebrew world. And the thing with this one is that a lot of what goes into the city of Tiriane I kind of already did because I had used it as a setting for a handful of sessions in the Quest of the Fateseer campaign that I've also talked about on here.
Oh, is this the one with the three elf siblings?
It is. It does involve them, like they do live here. So,
ooh, guys, this is crazy. Calvin's been running this campaign in his one setting for so long. He might be able to actually produce like a book or something.
Maybe I still got to do that like restaurant review book of all the random food places.
The restaurant review book. That might actually be a product that people might want. It's just like all of the little shops and restaurants in your setting, and we're like, just like what about them? What makes them special?
That would actually be kind of fun. Like just something that GMs can use to, like, if they want to have like a tavern or an inn or something, and they want to make it a bit more unique, and then just frame the book as a review. Not a website, but just frame it as like a series of reviews.
Yeah.
That could be something to look into. But yeah, so the campaign, it starts with them meeting this character by the name of Lucky Tate, who was also the guy who initiated the Quest of the Fateseer campaign, by hiring certain PCs to do a certain job. And they are meeting him in the Dusty Dagger Inn and Dinery, which is his usual hangout. So as I get into this, the city of Tiriane is... I don't think I've shown it to you yet, Ramon. I have like a Google Doc of basically the city itself. Like, I went through and I tried not to overload it with too much detail. I wanted to be flexible about things and develop things as we went on, because that was something I did a lot of in my other campaigns. So but I do have a city map. I do have several districts, and each district has just like a couple of either like a place that's interesting or a person that's interesting, and a lot of them are things that came up in games previously. Some of them just got a bit more detailed.
So it's like more organic than you planning ahead, and like they showed up when they were relevant, and now they get to, they're now there forever.
Exactly, exactly that. Kind of the benefit of having everything within the same game world. And so far, no campaign has done anything that would like offset the timeline too strongly. Like nothing apocalyptic has happened. I mean, so far.
Yeah, it was yet.
But yeah, no, I basically created a map, largely using a generator, and then just kind of nudging it a bit and coloring the sections as I wanted them to be, and then labeling them, and then just trying to give them like some background and personality that hopefully comes through in the game. And it's sort of similar to what I did with my world map. Again, just giving like a sentence or two for certain places and trying not to make things so rigid that I can't develop them as the game goes on. So yeah, they are meeting in the Dusty Dagger, where Lucky Tate is a frequent customer there. And we sort of meet the characters one at a time. Mr. Buttons was the first to arrive, with a certain air of superiority around him, this well-dressed catfolk in a suit. And since he was the first one there, he kind of assumed he was the only one who had been hired for this job, because he's just so confident in his own abilities. And then next was Poppy Pemberton, who also had a similar vibe, but was much less happy to be within an establishment like this. She did have that well-dressed sense of like superiority and authority, perhaps. Some serious RBF, as was described. And as she approached the same table where Lucky Tate and Mr. Buttons were sitting, she like stopped to basically wipe off the chair before she sat down. She clearly didn't like the atmosphere, and Lucky kind of suggested that the food was pretty good, but Poppy obviously had no interest in something that might affect her sensitive tummy. Although Poppy and Mr. Buttons got along pretty quickly, which I think is going to be fun in the future.
Nice.
Next was Alfie, who showed up in like not dressed as posh as the other two, but his clothes were well kept and subtle. He had a rapier on his belt that did have an ornate hilt, and he moved pretty gracefully as he introduced himself and sat down. And there was also this thing where, you know, I had the players sort of, I kind of asked them like, do your characters have any sort of history with each other? Would they already know each other? Just something for them to springboard off of. And it was clear that Alfie and Mr. Buttons do know each other. And Mr. Buttons was rather critical of Alfie's work, referring to it as shoddy. But Alfie, however, thought that, you know, he did things, he resolved things pretty well. We didn't get into certain specifics, but it was clear that Mr. Buttons had a belief in planning things well, while Alfie was more in favor of just, like, improvising. Which, again, I think is going to be interesting to see those two bounce off each other. And then lastly, a condor flew into the dinery. The people there could see it had like a little bit of a broken beak, and within its beak it was carrying a note. And it landed on that table and handed the note to, well, not handed, I guess it beaked the note to Lucky Tate. And it was a note from this kobold by the name of Hubo, who kind of scrawled out a note that sort of, it was literally just like F-U, signed Hubo.
What?
It seemed that at first he wasn't really interested in the job. He just wanted to return to where he had been currently living, which was the sewers under Tiriane, kind of preferring to keep to himself, it would seem, especially given the treatment he would get when he came up to the surface. But Lucky Tate was insistent. He went outside of the restaurant and managed to find Hubo and had a short conversation with him, basically saying that he knows what Hubo is good at and doesn't want to see those skills go to waste. And also, he'll be well paid. Which I think was kind of the thing that helped get him back into the room.
Interesting. He lives in the sewers, but he has a condor.
Yeah, I guess it's a condor who is okay with tight spaces and being underground.
I guess so. That's interesting. Okay.
But yeah, so they all returned to the Dusty Dagger. Poppy was obviously disgusted. Mr. Buttons was a bit annoyed by the bird. And Mr. Buttons handed Hubo a tissue, which he promptly ate.
Okay. I'll let the bird slide. That was pretty good. That was an S-Rec maneuver. Like,
yeah, I really like this cast. But yeah, at this point, with everyone assembled, Lucky introduced them to the job. So essentially what it was is that Lucky Tate had been hired to get a dagger delivered for a client. And he was, of course, light on the specifics and details and things like that. But he did say that the delivery was ambushed outside of the city. He tried to do some investigating of his own, but the thieves were clearly someone new in town, and he couldn't locate them. So he was going to hire this small band of people who no one would likely recognize to do some investigating in places where he might be, sort of more immediately obvious, or maybe they can pick up on something that he can't. He was able to tell them, like, where the ambush happened, but he couldn't and wouldn't tell them more about the dagger other than giving them sort of a description of it, and a drawing of it, without saying, the price of it or what it was intended for. Certainly nothing about the client that he was delivering the dagger for.
Yeah, makes sense.
So my intention at first was to run this as sort of an infiltration, and then this would have been like the preparation part where they gather some things they can use while infiltrating. I don't know if I didn't have you in the infiltration that I ran before. But they largely take place in 2 stages. Well, you have your prep stage, where you can get things ready for the infiltration itself and sort of set yourself up for more success. And that was what my intention was for this. I'll say up front that I did things kind of veered when we got into the actual session, and then it was just kind of more interesting what people were doing without adding the additional system onto it, but I do feel like I'll come back to those because I did have a lot of success with them in the other campaigns I've run them in. But either way, at this point, they were basically doing some investigating, so they did all kind of split off on their own, which I thought was interesting. Alfie was going to go look for some of his contacts. Hubo was going to go check out the actual scene of the ambush. Poppy was going to look into, other thieves, her own other contacts. And Mr. Buttons was going to do some more research on the dagger itself. So they all split up. Hubo was able to investigate the scene of the ambush. He found some evidence of about 4 to 6 people that had attacked this caravan or this cart. And he was also able to notice that there was a hidden compartment on the cart where the dagger would have been kept for delivery, which sort of implied that whoever these people were, they knew what they were doing, or at the very least knew what to look for. Meanwhile, Mr. Buttons was investigating the dagger, so he brought it to a different district, and he was able to meet with a blacksmith there by the name of Quirkon. And this is someone who I did make a small amount of NPCs, so sometimes I have the opportunity when a player is looking for someone who does a specific thing. If I'm lucky, I have someone who already does that, and then I can start building a relationship between that person, and, create something between those 2 characters that might come up in the future. But with the help of this blacksmith, Mr. Buttons was able to learn a bit about the dagger itself. Some sort of implication that the dagger itself is very well crafted and also likely used for rituals. With putting their heads together, Mr. Buttons suspected that the dagger was used for perhaps necromantic rituals. The blacksmith wasn't able to tell the magical elements of it, but Mr. Buttons was able to sort of put that together with the info.
That's really interesting. I mean, what was it? Necromancy's like outlawed in your world, so I see.
Yeah.
I see the greater plot in the works now.
What? Maybe. Meanwhile, Poppy was trying to find some of her own like friends and contacts who might know, where this item can be sold. Because again, Lucky Tate he's a connection, he's a fence, he's a guy who he's a middleman. And if someone was selling something like this, he would probably know about it. But since he wasn't able to find anything, he was, again, relying on other people to do some investigating where he might have missed something. So she was going to look into her own connections. And at first, she wasn't able to find anything, so she ended up at the Rat's Respite, which is like a small hole-in-the-wall kind of tavern that's popular with, like, rogue types. The types of guys who, like, sit in dark corners with their hoods up and look all menacing.
there's not enough corners in that place. Everyone has to take turns.
Yeah, they've got to rotate. Maybe they just build it like an octagon, so there's more corners.
Yeah, and there's like corners within corners. Like, and they purposely block out the lights so no one can see. Everywhere is dark.
Yeah, you don't want to trip in there. She did see a couple of familiar-looking faces that she managed to get some answers from, saying they overheard some guys trying to sell a dagger, but they didn't really have any more information on it. But since she did have that, she was able to sort of press on with some investigating of her own. One specific thing they mentioned, though, is that they definitely overheard the guys say that they didn't much like the food here. And when she went to talk to the bartender of the Rat's Respite, he basically said that he suggested they try talking to Lucky Tate if they wanted to sell something. And obviously the bandits who showed up to do that weren't very interested in that idea. But another odd thing that he heard is that they had an interest in dwarven food, and that was the sort of the thing they were having a craving for, which was an interesting detail, but Poppy couldn't figure out like what to do with that. Meanwhile, Alfie, who unfortunately made several bad rolls, was trying to talk to. Well, so because Poppy was already taking the more like criminal angle, he went to see if he could talk to the regular guards at like the city gates, who might have seen someone coming and going from after the ambush. Unfortunately, due to some low rolls, the guard he talked to was one who was not at all interested in being persuaded or bribed in any way. And it was actually another character that was previously used in the Fateseer campaign, just very briefly. And I kind of liked her character. She was more of a straight-to-the-point kind of person, and mayhaps will be around a bit more. But this member of the city guard, she was like obviously suspicious of him, and at a point where pretty much every roll he was making was like below 10, she just kind of like handed him off to another guard to give like he acted as though the dagger was an item that he had lost or had been stolen or something like that. So she just kind of passed him off to like another less experienced guard to make like a report on it, basically. And that guard was less than helpful and overly nervous and overly chatty. He was just kind of like, oh yeah, no, if you just give us the information, we can make a report and then see find it and do something and blah 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 blah, and just going on. And Alfie was just like, you know what? I think I'm okay.
Nice.
But they were able to reconvene and share their information. Mr. Buttons was critical of Alfie, but when they did share their info, Alfie was able to figure out, with what Poppy was saying, Alfie was able to figure out where someone might go in Tiriane if they did specifically want dwarven food, because he grew up in the city.
Ah, okay. Cool.
There was a conversation of wondering like where else the bandits might go to sell this stolen dagger. Mr. Buttons, he did know a couple of people. The only one he could think of, though, was another fence by the name of Rory, who he has a tense relationship with. And that was just kind of leaving a space open for an NPC to be created who might come up later. But more importantly, or I should say additionally rather, they were also trying to figure out like what the purpose of the dagger would be. Their best guess was that it was probably someone like a collector who wanted it, more likely than maybe like a cultist or something, just because of how rare and expensive and difficult to transport something like this would be. But with the information in hand, they decided to head to a district of the city that's very popular with, that's very like dwarf, like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It just has like a significant dwarven population.
It's like any sort of like ethnic grouping of people in a big city. It's like, you know, Chinatown, Dwarven Town, whatever.
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah, pretty much.
Little Italy, like, you know.
Literally that, but for dwarves.
Yeah.
So they headed there, and they started to do some investigation on where someone might have gone for food specifically, because that was sort of the lead they had. And there were a couple places they could have gone. There was one place called War Chiefs, which is sort of a larger, more touristy sort of franchise location, because I guess my world has a McDonald's now.
I was gonna say there better be more war chiefs.
Yeah, there's gonna be one in every major city now.
Yeah, they need to have like exclusive Monster Energy potion flavors. That's
of course. So there was that, and there was also Bobble Beasts, which is a bit smaller. Like, it has like a smaller menu, but it's more homemade stuff. So they did decide to investigate Bobble Beasts first. I don't know why they didn't want to check out War Chiefs. Although I think I might have fun with that in the future. But at Bobble Beasts, they ran into a dwarf by the name of Asvol, who runs the location. And as they were having a conversation with him, they picked up on that he seemed a bit nervous about a couple of guys who were in the restaurant who were very similar to the descriptions they got of the people who were looking for somewhere to sell the dagger in the first place. So they did get a table, they sat near these people, they overheard a conversation with regards to these bandits. One was sort of complaining to the other and saying that he wished Walter was still around. And with a couple of checks, they realized that they were talking about Walter One-Eye, who is, again, tying back to previous things, in the Crown of Dragons campaign that I was running with these players, one of the things they did was help capture a bandit leader mastermind type by the name of Walter One-Eye. And they also ran... Yep.
Was that the Cyclops?
Yeah, that was the guy that had the Cyclops captured.
Wow, deep cuts.
Yeah, man. So it seems that his gang, the Shadow Takers, are in a very rough shape without their leader.
Wait, they're called the Shadow Takers? Like they take people to shadows?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
They thought it sounded cool.
Damn, man. It's okay. All of my gang names is like whatever plus color. Like so like I totally get it.
I mean, that's the first thing when you make a bandit gang. It's gotta sound cool.
Yeah, that's fair. It's gotta sound scary, like the Shadow Takers.
Or the Viper's Hand.
Oh yeah, there's so many hands. I love the hands.
Which only sounds cool if you don't think about it.
The Viper's hands. These things don't have hands. Oh, I love it. I love it so much because, like, it's just, I don't know. Gangs in like fantasy TTRPGs are like the silliest thing in my opinion. Because it's like, oh god, the dragon's attacking, but no, we gotta fight the scary Viper's hands. Just a couple of dudes, just hanging around, causing trouble.
Yeah, let me ambush those people who can shoot fire out of their hands.
Yeah, the dudes literally glowing with all of power, like.
You know, I got this.
My name's Tim from Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm from Fantasy New York. I can take this guy.
Yeah, take my 6-piece combo. Stab, stab. Like... Sorry, okay. I got it out of my system.
No, man, that's what the bandits are. But yeah, they did sort of overhear this conversation. They did briefly talk to these guys, suggesting that they might be able to move a secret object if someone was trying to sell something subtly, under the guise of saying, we're just asking questions. And Mr. Buttons gave them a business card, which I did not know he had, but...
Just a business card? How is he going to reach him? This is Fantasyland. I don't have phone numbers. Like, this is who I am. Hopefully you don't forget. I'm the cat in the suit.
Yeah, I mean, pretty memorable.
That's so good. I mean, again, S-rank maneuver. Like, here's my card.
So after that, the bandits, they got up and left, but Hubo and Alfie went to follow them. Unfortunately, Hubo got spotted. One of the bandits tried to shove him back and totally failed at it. So a small encounter started, and one of the bandits got knocked out, and the other one just pretty much knew he couldn't win a fight against like 4 other people, so he just surrendered. And with a bit of interrogation, gave up some information about the dagger itself and like where the bandits were hiding out. Essentially saying that they were hiding out in the large basement that was underneath the Bobble Beasts, that had some like expanded tunnels. It seemed that they had intimidated the store owner so that they could use this location. Also mentioned that their group was being led by a woman by the name of Arlene, who had found out about the dagger, didn't know who was going to buy it originally, and was just looking for somewhere to sell off this item that they had acquired. He pointed out a trap door, which led down to this lower level. And then, so what I had said, well, at least what the guy had said, is that any intruder will be in for a surprise when he was talking about the traps. But because of my thick fantasy New York accent, one of the players thought I said that Eddie and Shooter will be in for a surprise.
That's so good.
And I just thought that was really funny. So these 2 guys are now Eddie and Shooter.
Nice. Those are some good names. Those are really good names.
They really are.
I love it. I hope Eddie and Shooter show back up. Like we should write those down. That Eddie and Shooter now exist.
Yeah, man, they're out there. They might be recruited into... I did want to use, like, the organization rule system in this, so... I don't know, maybe they'll be recruited into the gang.
Yeah, they'll level up and become, they'll become higher ranking mob bosses or something. Watch as the PCs like dismantle this criminal organization while they rise to power to fill in like the power vacuum. It's just they're always too low level for the PCs to care, and all of a sudden Eddie and Shooter are just the top, like because they keep killing everybody else, so the only ones left is Eddie and Shooter.
Ooh, that could have been their plan all along.
They call me Eddie, and this is Shooter. We run this block.
Yeah, I hope they go far.
Me too. I'm big fans of Eddie and Shooter.
But yeah, they got that information out of them. They told Shooter to get his friend and get out of here. And then they basically made plans for how to deal with the with getting in there, getting the dagger out. And again, I was going to use the infiltration rule system, but I just kind of really liked how things turned out without it, so I didn't want to bog things down by putting another rule set in the way. But basically their plan was that Alfie and Hubo were going to pretend to be new members of the gang, and then Poppy and Mr. Buttons would come in later, pretending that they had heard about this dagger and were interested in buying it. Alfie and Hubo were going to claim that they had been invited by Eddie and Shooter, who were now just, off getting drinks somewhere else.
Nice.
So after some attempts to patch up, and also, this is part of why I was thinking of the aid thing recently, just because they tried to patch each other up, including an aid on a medicine check, and it didn't really work out. And in fact, it lowered the result of the roll. And I would rather people be more encouraged to like help out where they can instead of worry about lowering a roll. But yep.
I was gonna say, I think there should just be like a clause in like not the aid action, but like the medic check or whatever you have to make, where it's just like if someone wants to help out, they should just be able to help out, but you can't help yourself because you're being worked on. Like that, I feel like that's like a compromise.
Yeah, something like that, man. Like the thing that bugs me the most about it is if you get a critical fail, it makes the check worse. Like if you fail and it doesn't do anything, that's probably fine. But the fact that you can make it worse, I don't know. I don't like that because that discourages you from helping.
Yeah.
But yeah, they tried to patch each other up, and then they started heading down. So Alfie and Hubo went in first, and they saw that there was like this small area below the trap door, like a small, like 15, 20-foot room. And then at the opposite side of it was like this barred iron door. And upon seeing that there was no people like immediately below the trap door, they questioned if a more stealthy approach might work, and they just like sneak in and take the thing. But as they were having this conversation, they did see like a very dim light approaching. So Alfie went back up to inform the others of what they were seeing, and Hubo took that chance to hide as someone came out calling for Eddie or Shooter or whoever was there. Hubo tried an impersonation, which did not work out. So they ended up going... the stealthy approach was plan B, so they went back to plan A of just pretending to be new members of the gang.
Right.
And then the rest of the team is able to approach again with Poppy and Mr. Buttons acting as like buyers of this item, who were coming in with Hubo and Alfie. So I guess this was sort of like plan C. I don't know. I lost track of their plan numbers, to be honest.
It all works out in the end, so it's fine. You got the party in front of the adventure.
Yep. That's all I needed. So yeah, there was some discussion back and forth, including like Poppy complaining about the environment. But also, again, like they wanted to buy this dagger, so the bandit agreed to let them come in if they removed their weapons. Poppy didn't want to leave her weapons lying on the ground. So instead they were led up to a sort of a small storage area past the metal door where they could rest their weapons on top of like some boxes and stuff. And they spotted another bandit guard there who they could see was like holding onto a spherical bottle of something on his belt. So yeah, they were told to leave their weapons behind. There were some attempts to like conceal those weapons, which I think should have been done with thievery, now that I'm thinking back to it. But I used like deception or stealth mostly.
Yeah.
Some were successful, some weren't, including Hubo, who tried to hide a weapon in his underpants. But Poppy used Karen mode, I guess. She used intimidation to avoid having to put her weapon down, saying it was an important family heirloom and stuff like that. So the bandit who was taking them in, he decided to just like carry it instead. So he had it with them as he was leading them to sort of this meeting that, as far as he knew, was to buy this weapon.
Right.
They did ask the bandits' names, and they found the one leading them was Barkley. And he was always named Barkley, and I did not make that name up.
I mean, you made it up beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you made all of this up, so, you know.
Honestly,
you made up all the names, Calvin.
Why would I not name a generic goon? But yeah, they were led through the tunnels, including, which also, it gave them a chance to see the trapped door that Shooter was talking about before. So they knew how the trap worked. And then Barkley headed off to set up the meeting, leaving them alone for a moment. Unfortunately, again, because these bandits lost their mastermind leader, he did leave them sort of near where the bandits were storing some, some generic weapons. So I think some of them did take a chance to take those weapons, but also had to roll another check to conceal them, basically.
Right.
But Barkley returned, and he led them into... So this area beneath Bauble Beasts, it's sort of like a dugout tunnel with a few different rooms that works for a bandit hideout. My imagining of a lot of dwarven locations that are above the surface is that they'll have basements, but they'll usually be a bit more expanded than a typical building basement. Instead of just like one or two rooms, it'll have like a series, usually like a series of tunnels or something like that. Just because I think that's really cool. So they're led into what's essentially an office, and it's a rather nice office space. They can see there's like storage areas, there's shelves, there's a piano that was down here somehow. And they meet with Arlene, who they see is this tall, buff woman with tattoos that go up her arms all the way up to her neck. And they can see that she's carrying 2 hammers on her belt. And as she's looking at the party, she has like her arms crossed and her chin tilted up, so she's just like looking down at them as they enter the room. So at this point, there was again some conversation, the dagger was revealed, and then the party initiated Plan D, which involved Hubo creating a distraction for Arlene with the piano that was in her office. And that was just a thing that was like on the map that I used, but they seemed really interested in it, so I was like, okay, sure, there's a piano there. And it came in handy as part of this distraction, which gave Poppy a bit of a bonus to her attempt to, as she looked at the box where the dagger was, she essentially swapped the dagger with a more generic one, after Arlene had handed it off for them to inspect. They handed the box back, and then Mr. Buttons was just claiming that, you know, this wasn't the actual dagger they were interested in, and they must have been mistaken. And Arlene was confused, tried to argue, but unfortunately, this is the part where the party decided to roll well. So it was enough to give them a bit of a head start as they went to slip out. And they got far enough away before Arlene realized what had happened with the dagger in the box. And then a bit of a fight started.
Ooh.
The Shadow Takers were chasing them through the tunnels. The party was just kind of stopping them at like certain choke points and slowing them down while fighting back a bit. Poppy did end up going down in the fight, but was revived pretty quickly. But other than that, they were able to escape the Shadow Takers. They pulled some barrels and stuff onto the trapdoor, which bought them enough time to sort of stealth their way back into the city. And then they returned to the Dusty Dagger Inn and Dinery. It was late at night at this point, but they were able to find Lucky Tate in his room. And there were some questions of if he was romanceable, which, I mean, I'm not going to say no.
Romanceable. Goddamn Baldur's Gate getting people all hot and bothered. God damn it.
Pretty much. I was like, I mean, sure, why not?
That game.
I mean, they did just meet him like the day before, but...
Is this NPC romanceable? No,
It was-
his name is not Garrus. He's not romanceable.
Oh. But yeah, they found Lucky Tate. So this was a time where I realized again I'm one brain playing against 4, because the literal job he had given them was to find out who took the dagger and where. Like that was the literal interpretation of what he asked them to do. And obviously when I was setting this up, like my intent was that they get the dagger and bring it back. But apparently I did not say these specific words at the time.
Oh, okay.
So when they got back, they were like, yeah, we know who took the dagger. It was the Shadow Takers, and they have it in this secret hideout under Bauble Beasts. And he was just like, are you sure? And questions like that. They did, however, want to negotiate for more pay to retrieve the item itself. Because they claimed, you know, we know where it is, we know who has it, we just didn't retrieve it yet. We want to get, like, more pay to retrieve the item.
So awesome.
Which is, like, it's a bandit campaign, I don't know why. So they did make a deception check to sort of hide the fact that they had the dagger. I didn't tell them this, but they literally got the DC for the check to deceive Lucky Tate. Like the number that was rolled, it was like the exact number they needed.
Oh, nice.
So he was like, okay, bring the dagger back, like literally, like the first thing in the morning. Because the original timeline he gave them was like a couple of days. So now it was like, well, if you know where it is, bring it back first thing in the morning, and then we'll talk about like pay and stuff. So the party basically went to hang out for an hour.
Nice.
They actually hung out at the Lucky Nugget Inn, which the Fateseer party has been to before. I think you were in that game. It was when they first got to the city of Tiriane. It was that place with the really good chicken.
Oh yeah, and then we spent all our money. Well, I spent all of my money.
Which, I mean, it was worth it.
Yeah.
So they basically hung out there for an hour, and then they came back, and like at this point, like Lucky Tate was like back asleep because he thought like they wouldn't be back until the morning. But they showed up, they pretended to be exhausted from a fight, and they did manage to make their negotiations, so they got a bit of extra pay for delivering the dagger. And Lucky Tate was also a bit like, part of him was kind of doing these guys a bit of a favor, giving them this important job. But he also realized, oh, these guys are maybe a bit smarter than I gave them credit for, so now I gotta be a bit smarter with my words in the future.
Nice.
Yeah, he does respect them a bit more, so that's probably a good thing for if he's romanceable or not.
Well, I mean, I guess like, you know, he's a savvy fence, and they're a savvy bunch of adventurers. So, you know, game respects game, I guess.
True. But yeah, they did get their extra payment, and that is about where the session ended. Although Lucky Tate did mention that he might need security on the actual drop-off of the item, which is kind of what I had planned for the next session. At least assuming the players don't go off and do something else.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, like, our plan for these sessions, especially because they were coming off of a campaign where they were, like, level 9 or 10. So going all the way back to level 1 is kind of rough. So our plan was to basically just do, like, 1 level per session until level 4, and then count XP normally from there.
Okay.
So there will be a bit of a time skip, and then they'll be at a higher level, and then we'll do stuff from there. But yeah, next they have to deliver the dagger to the client who originally wanted it in the first place. Who might that be? What might they want it for? Who knows?
Interesting. No, this is pretty cool. I actually really like the idea of getting the characters, instead of starting at like a higher level, you're like, you know, you're progressing at a faster pace, and then slowing things down once you get to that kind of mid-range of like effectiveness, right?
Yeah. Once you get to the point where like you have like a few more options for stuff, especially with the free archetype, I think 4 would be an interesting, like a good place to like start counting XP.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I might do that. The next start of next campaign I run or something like that. That might be something kind of cool to do. So, you know, every session, everything kind of, it's rapid, but still slow enough that people get to try out all the new stuff they get.
Yeah, man. Because like what I wanted to do is for the in-game calendar, I wanted to have the game start at the beginning of like the new in-game year. So I'm basically just having like each session is basically around a week after the other, like a bit like just like like a time skip between them. And then when they get to where we're actually counting XP, that's when it'll be the new year, and then who knows what happens from there.
I'm interested. How often, like, how hard do you keep track of time in your campaigns? I guess I want to ask.
Well, it helps a lot that like I do have like calendars usually, and then I would be like more rigid on tracking like travel times and stuff like that. And then for this one, like, because I do want to have that specific time, I kind of have to know like where I'm time skipping from. I don't think I set a specific date for the start of this campaign. And honestly, that might be a thing I change in the background. Because there was some stuff that I don't want to say what, but there is stuff that happened in other campaigns that I need to have happened at a reasonable time before this campaign starts.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be pretty cool to put together maybe like, I don't know, I'm assuming this podcast is probably gonna go to the end of time. You know, like 5 years later after, you know, thousands of episodes of Calvin's campaigns on YouTube, maybe we should like put together like a succinct timeline of all the campaigns that happened like in your world. Just be like, you know, like maybe a couple of years of like all of the nonsense. That'd be pretty fun, and see where things kind of overlapped. That'd be kind of cool.
I actually really, I didn't even think of that. Just like a master calendar of everything that's happened.
Yeah, and so, you know, we could just like have like, oh yeah, this is all the things that happened, right? Like maybe a certain week or something was very fucking eventful in your world, like 5 different times, like, or like you could have like the same, like important, like obviously like at the like year's end or something like that, or New Year's would be a significant holiday throughout the whole region or whatever, right? We could have like, you know, stuff happening, like different stuff happening in different campaigns at the same time, and technically the campaigns kind of might have even crossed paths and they don't even know it. I think that would be the coolest part, would be like, you know, all these reoccurring characters and reoccurring stuff is all happening in the background of each campaign, so, you know, all the players get to enjoy all of the silly references and nonsense. It's kind of one of the beauties of running your own setting, is that you get to, you know, keep track of all this, and at the end of it kind of being like, oh yeah, by the way, this happened here and this happened there, and that guy's from that campaign and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really do want to do that. Like, even just mentioning how this gang, the Shadow Takers, is just the remnants of what's left of them after the other party like took out their leader. You know, I just, it was an interesting thing that obviously like the party already knew about, and it just got an interesting reaction, and I do want to do more stuff like that, because, you know, a lot of stuff happened in that campaign. There is one thing that I wanted to spoil for them that I'm trying very hard not to. I might tell you off recording, because it hasn't like specifically come up yet. It might come up next session, though, so I don't know if I should wait till then.
Ooh, well, you'll know next episode when we talk about this campaign, folks.
True. Ramon, anything else you want to know about the about Tiriane, the City of Coin, or the Rule of Coin campaign before we? I struggled with that title for a while. I should have just called it something like. I should have just called it Coin Rules Everything Around Me, because that's the reference I was making.
Yeah, you could have done that. That sounds pretty cool. Or like you could just do that. You could be like, City of Coin, Coin Rules Everything Around Me. The city campaign by Calvin. Like, you just keep going.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, it sounds really cool. It sounds super awesome. I kind of like the idea of you having a campaign set in one place. That would be kind of nice for once.
That was part of it, yeah, instead of a road trip.
Yeah, instead of this globe-spanning adventure. But yeah, it's always nice to kind of change up the formula that you've been doing for a while and have all this stuff happening in one place, and getting to reminisce of all the cool references and stuff like that from previous campaigns. But yeah, hopefully Eddie and Shooter survive and become big time dogs. And yeah, that's all I want out of this campaign.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, for all the folks out there, thanks a ton for listening to this episode. Actually, I'm curious, if you've done a more like urban city-based campaign out there, why not drop a comment on how you ran it, or if you've played in one, you know, drop a comment on how your GM might have run the game, what you enjoyed about it, that sort of thing. I do want to absorb other people's ideas. My instinct is to do something very sandboxy with this, and that's sort of what we're going to do when we get to level 4, but I want to know how other people's, you know, games have gone. So if you've run a game like that or played a game like that, drop a comment about it below. And additionally, if you're interested in hearing more about other games we've played or run, if you're interested in Pathfinder or Lancer or all the other games we've talked about, then check out the podcast playlist. It's got all of the episodes. And you can use it in the YouTube Music app or something, whatever YouTube does with podcast playlists. They did something up. They did an update like a couple weeks ago, but I forgot what it was. But I'm sure it's cool. Additionally, there are a whole bunch of gaming live streams on the channel. In fact, when you're listening to this on Wednesday, if I get the edit done in time, then on Thursday, the day after, we'll be starting a new game. I finished Alan Wake and the sequel, or semi-sequel, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and I was playing those in preparation for playing Control, which I'm told has some references to Alan Wake. I do want to play Alan Wake 2, but my PC is not beefy enough to play it. So, it's going to be a while.
One day, folks. One day. Maybe we'll start a Patreon or something. Be like, get Calvin a new PC so he can play better games, I guess.
Yeah, man. Give me a new processor so I can play Alan Wake 2. Because I got to play it and stream it, so... but yeah, so we've got Control coming up, we've got Baldur's Gate 3 on Fridays, and we've got Mass Effect Andromeda on Sundays. And Titanfall will be played at some point in the future, just because I'm in a mood for some mech stuff. Because I actually started watching the original Gundam, series movies, so that's a thing.
Yeah, good luck to you. Gundam is very big. It's a very big franchise, and they're all very different.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot of vibes in Gundam. It's kind of crazy, and they keep coming out with more stuff, and I'm like, this is nuts. So,
even Witch from Mercury is very different from Iron-Blooded Orphans. Very different vibes, but some similar themes.
Which is, for sure, very different from Gundam Seed, very different from just OG Gundam, and it's a lot. It's a lot to kind of deal with. But yeah, it's really fun, and I love Gundam, so yeah. Have some fun, Calvin.
I might get into it a bit more because I didn't realize how much of the themes from original Gundam were still present in the newer series. But that's a whole other thing. While you're still checking out the description of this video, because that's where we have the podcast linked, why not go ahead and check out all the other people we have linked below. If you're into the Lancer RPG, we've got a whole bunch of Lancer writers and creators linked below. You can go check out their stuff. Additionally, go check out the Untold Stories project. They are in their one-shot season for the rest of the year, as well as having started a new series that's taking place on Tuesdays. So go check them out, give them some love. I'm going to be running Lancer on there next week by the time you hear this, so no pressure. But go ahead and check that channel out. And that's all I've got. Ramon, is there anything else we need to say before we go?
No, I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, for all of our bandit GMs and criminal players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.